In 1989, there was a case that took the world by storm, and that was the Menendez brothers trial, where they were put on trial for the murder of their parents. Now, the whole case seemed to be a plot written in Hollywood for a screen setting that would absolutely become a blockbuster. But the reality of it was two people that were supposedly just gung ho about murdering their parents with no reason, no rhyme, and they just did it because they were vile, evil boys. But understand, they gave a different story. In their story, they were the victims of two abusive, sexually and physically parents, and they have had enough by the time they hit 21 and 18, respectively. The story garnered so much critique from people from ranging from they were deranged to they were victims that it ended up in almost a lock and tie kind of situation in the court. They ended up being two mistrials and eventually a conviction of them that sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole by 1996. Now we're in 2025 and things seem to be have taken a change for the at least seemingly better for them. The death of Jose and Kitty Menendez took a turn when they came home one day. The brothers were there, and now the story that they told. I'm going to go into this real quick. The story that they told was that it was a mafia hit. That they came home and their parents were shot by two mafia people, and that's exactly what happened. Now they eventually went on some kind of shopping spree, which also painted them in a bad light if they were indeed abused. However, if they were abused as children, the whole story about them going out to shop may have been a celebratory to be free from the abuse. That was still up in the air. And the jury eventually didn't believe that they had any kind of abuse done to them, at least not to the point where they would act like that and become not guilty. So for years, that has been the story going on that they were worth to be in jail until, of course, there was a resentencing that happened in May 13th this year. Now, the resentencing was under a different penal law that was looking back at the case that would try them differently and give them a different a different punishment under the minor statutory side of things. So instead of getting life in prison, they were going to get 50 to life with a minimum of 35 served, and then they can be eligible for parole. Well, that time is almost about here, and it would be this year. They would be eligible for parole. Now, the question that's floating around is whether or not they are deemed capable of getting it. One, two, whether they deserve it. And three, why give it now if they already served so much time? So the question that now has gone before, and at this point, the governor of California, because that is exactly where it's taking place. Originally, the June 13th this year was when they were supposed to originally have the hearing for the parole, and that has not been put to that date anymore because the victim's family kind of delayed that idea. So now it is pushed back to August 21st or 22nd this year to find out whether or not they'll be eligible for that parole hearing. They're trying to give everybody the due process that they need to figure out things on their end. What are the implications of them getting parole now? How are the victims going to feel? Whether or not they're up for it by behavior, if they're rehabilitated, if they have any remorse, are they at risk for doing it again? At this time, even clemency is on the board as to whether or not Gavin Newsom is able to commute their sentence, and that could override everything in the whole situation. Now, it could be that they go for parole and that be done and not given to them, and they end up serving their time for the rest of their life. Or Governor Gavin decides to do the exact same opposite and give them a commuted sentence based on time served. It's a lot to look into because this is a matter of public opinion as well as fact. Many people, and I can say this for myself, I'm not speaking for Corey, speaking for me, based on the way I remember watching this, because I watched it unfold. I remember watching this trial, and both boys seem to have some sort of an issue about them. They came across weird, locked down, kind of shut off from actual conversation. They didn't have any personality per se. It for me, it felt as though, yeah, they had gone through something in that house that they had endured for quite some time. Even when they were asked to speak about it, they could barely get through the information that they were giving about their parents, about the father coming in at night to mess with them and the mother doing nothing about it. And even at times with the mother witnessing it and still not doing anything about it. if that happened and that is taken into consideration now, they could easily get this behavior, this parole issued to them, or possibly even commute the sentence and have it override the parole or altogether. Now, a lot of people from back in the time when the case happened to now, they said that the kids got that kind of a punishment because of some sort of bias, either because of homophobia or sexism or whatever the case was at the time. Because you have to remember in 1990s, 89 to 93, the conversation around spousal abuse of children, it felt kind of off kilter. It wasn't one that you wanted to talk about necessarily because it was so dark of a theme. And many people thought that if you talked about it and you came forward saying it, that you might actually be a part of the rainbow community because you talked about it. Some of the jurors even had that mindset and they didn't want to go against the mindset of the time. And they believed that played a part in what the jurors decided as a guilty verdict. A lot of people said they were acting out of greed because of what they did with the money. They really wanted the parents dead because what they had in terms of fortune, they weren't allowed to get until later on in their life. And they wanted this in order to get that money based on their actions afterwards. That may have also played a part in the guilty verdict. Now, what has to happen is that Gavin Newsom has about 90 days to decide whether or not he intervenes on the parole board's decision. He can decide that. But the question is, will that be something that he has to take in consideration for his political career? What happens if Gavin Newsom decides to give them clemency? How's it going to affect his governorship? Will he be viewed different? Now, we all know he has aspirations to run for president someday. Will this affect it and say to himself, nah, no, we're probably not going to do it because I don't want to mess with this case. I'm going to let the parole board do what they got to do, and I'll stay out of it completely. That might be one of the things he's thinking about. It may not be. At this point, we're still waiting for the August parole board hearing. By the fall, uh, technically he has until November to decide. Technically, I don't think he'll wait that long because I think if he decides to do it, he's going to probably do it before the hearing, so he doesn't come around to say if they do deny the parole and he comes along and gives clemency, it could really look bad for him. So I don't think he'll take till November to decide that. If they're seemingly coming forward with any kind of new information of misconduct or anything like that that happened while they were in prison, that could also affect a bunch of things. So it's an up in the air business, even though the resentencing has happened. The question now is for you guys to answer. Do you think that they might have been reformed while being in prison? Were they guilty to begin with without the idea of abuse? Do you think that they should be released because they were abused if you do believe they were abused? Is clemency versus giving them the parole would be better? Which one would be the better option if you take out into consideration Gavin Newsom running for president? Or is this going to have the same kind of effect that OJ had, where the public and certain interferences can dictate how a case ends up? There's a lot to decide, a lot to figure out, because this has been an ongoing situation for plus 30 plus years now. For me, I would think it's a tough decision for Gavin to have to make, like him or not, because in this situation, one will affect your ability to move forward as a governor, possible president, and the other one, you have people's lives weighing in the balance if they are indeed innocent. Also, if they are indeed guilty, and you decide to give them clemency, you've now put yourself at the stake, especially if something reoccurs with them. So whatever your thoughts are, please leave them below. Do you think that they're reformed? Should they be released? Or is this something that they should just serve out the rest of their time and go through with it the way that they were originally sentenced? We look forward to hearing your viewpoint on this one.